Hi, Maria. Good morning.
Hi. Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. You're the first YouTube bookfluencer I've ever spoken to, so this feels very special.
Oh, great. I feel very honored. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's so I'm in Toronto right now, and I'm
Oh,
here between two different book festivals.
oh.
And I had one over the weekend called Eden Mills, and it was in a tiny village that basically barely had reception, and it was wonderful. Yeah, it was in people's backyards. They set up a street with booths and tents, and it was just absolutely, yeah, it was wonderful.
Oh, great. Yeah. So you've been touring with the book for quite a while now, have you?
So I had a US tour in June, and then now things are picking up again on the Canadian festival circuit because, yeah, Canada has a pretty rich tradition of literary festivals. So
Mhm.
I'm happy to be involved in that. Yeah, I've been amazed by this Booker community and the number of prediction lists there were. And yeah, I saw that you had predicted five of the books on the list, which is very impressive. But yeah, I wasn't expecting this kind of community around the book prize. So it's been wonderful. Yeah, to see that.
It's such like a wonderful coincidence in a way that within your novel, you reference George Saunders' debut winning the Man Booker Prize, and now your own book is listed for the award. So I want to start by asking you, like, where were you when you found out the news that your book had been listed, and what was your reaction to that?
I was in Montreal house sitting for a friend, and I was walking along one of their beautiful canals, and I got a text message from my UK publisher and saying that they wanted to talk to me over the phone. They had some good news for me. And I did know that the Booker long list was going to be announced on that day. I usually try not to follow along book award dates because I just try not to get my hopes up or,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I had seen some buzz around my book on the long list predictions. And again, I was just trying to keep that out of my head. But when I saw that text message from my UK publisher and they had, you know, they don't usually text me. So I thought maybe something was afoot. And so when they told me, I was really thrilled. And it hit, the news hit me in a way that other award nominations had not, because I'm always happy to be nominated, right? I'm always happy and grateful. This one felt like it was all of those things, but also like, wow, I've written such a personal book, and now knowing that so many more people will read it, both feels really wonderful and kind of strange, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Mm.
Well, it's very exciting, and yeah, I was so happy to discover the book through the prize and read it now because I was so impressed by how creative and innovative it is in its story and structure, and I found it moving and funny, and a surprising aspect of the book is that it how it can be comedic while dealing with something as serious and immediate as the ongoing war in Ukraine. And it also still takes this very seriously. So I found it very impactful. And to begin with, so I want to start with the very beginning of the novel, and it because it does take an unusual form, but it begins with Yeva, a scientist in Ukraine who valiantly tries to breed and save endangered snails. And personally, I've never had an interest in snails, but I found myself engrossed in the facts concerning them that she recounts as she has such a passionate love for snails. So, what first drew you to writing about endangered snails?
Right. So I was already writing about the romance tour industry in Ukraine, and I wanted to explore the motivations of those who took part in this industry, and including the motivations of the men and the women. And I just knew that the characters I wanted to focus on, especially the women characters, would have motivations other than romance. And then I happened upon this article by Ed Young. It's called The Last of Its Kind, and it was published in The Atlantic in 2019. And it's about a biologist in Hawaii who is taking care of snail endlings. At the time, it was kind of this, not a trailer, but it wasn't quite a stationary lab, I think. And just reading that article and the kind of mental toll that this took on the biologist, of course, and his team to witness extinction happening right before their eyes,
Mm.
right? They are taking care of truly the last members of certain species. And by the way, that team is doing better now. There's more funding now. I hear that their snail conservation efforts are coming along nicely, but at the time, just the feeling I got from that article was just it was pretty devastating.
Mm.
And I didn't know that I could care so much about snails, and yet Ed Young's writing made me care about them, and that's the brilliant thing about his writing, I think. And then I couldn't get that out of my mind, and because I wanted to write about that, and I was already writing about romance tours, I wanted to find a way to combine two things that I was passionate about into
Mm.
one book. So it made sense to me that one of the women who's taking part in the tours, Yeva, for those of your viewers who haven't read the book, she's using the proceeds from dating these men to fund, yeah, her conservation efforts, and she has this lab. And then the lab dovetailed nicely with the kidnapping plan by the other women who take part in the tours, right? Who then want to kidnap these men as a way to bring down this entire romance industry. So yeah, once I had that kind of lab, it was a very useful plot point for the rest of the book.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
I'm glad it does. I'm glad it does make sense.
I mean, it seems like that kind of wild that all these things could come together, but they do in the story, and it does kind of fall into place. And one of Yeva's favorite snails is called Lefty, and because of the way that his shell curls, and even though Lefty isn't exactly given a personality, I still found him very endearing, as if he were a character. And so, have you ever kept snails yourself? And have you ever had this sense of sort of imbuing them with a distinctive identity?
I have not had snails myself. I have always enjoyed them. As a child, I had parrots, and I did notice how they had. I mean, every animal has their own personality, and I was pretty amazed by how such small birds with such small brains could have such big personalities that differed between each other.
Mm.
So yeah, with Lefty, I mean, I guess yeah, his entire personality in the book is pretty much the fact that he is whirled the wrong way, right?
Hmm.
And how most of his species, their shells whirl to the right, his whirls to the left, and yeah, and that kind of impossibility almost of breeding with the rest of his species, which I think for me that was a parallel with Yeva as well, that in a way she feels like she has been born a different way, right? She's asexual, so she doesn't want to pursue that with other people. So I do see that parallel between Lefty and
Mm.
Yeva. Yeah, that they're very unique in that way.
Yeah, definitely. It felt like she really empathized with him in a strange way, and also for being, different from the rest of his kind, and I think that's what endeared me to Lefty as well, of being kind of different from the crowd and
And
feeling.
I just want to add, so he is based on a real left whirling snail that was in the UK. His name was Jeremy, and he was a garden snail. And the person, I believe, he was in a lab, and his story launched an entire international search to find him a left whirling mate. And then right now, as we record this interviews, there's actually a search to find a New Zealand left whirling snail a mate as well. So too bad that they weren't alive at the same time. But yeah, so this is something that does happen in real life. It's very rare.
Hmm.
And I love the way it kind of brings people together.
As you've mentioned, Yeva partly funds her RV or mobile lab, as she calls it. through having these arranged dates with Westerners who have traveled to the country for romance. And I have to admit, I hadn't heard of this disturbing industry before reading your book. And you mentioned before that you initially wanted to write about the sort of romance tourism. So when did you first become aware of it, and what inspired you to want to write about it in a novel?
One of the things that inspired me to write about it was something that happened to my sister, actually. She was on an airplane on her way to Princeton, and she's a renowned composer. She's ambitious and a very impressive person. And the seat neighbor on this airplane was this American fellow, and they got to chatting. And as soon as he found out that she was born in Ukraine, he said, "Well, I would love a Ukrainian girl as a wife because American women are so ambitious and aggressive." And I would have loved to have seen her face in that moment, and just it when
Gosh.
she told me that story, I thought, my God, so what are people saying about Ukrainian women, right? And then
Mm.
I actually did this Google search, this English language Google search, Ukraine woman. And the search results were often, how to date Ukrainian women. And not that far down the page were these advertisements for romance tours that bring or used to bring before the invasion men from all over the world into Ukraine, kind of sold on this promise that they would find this perfect docile bride, as if feminism hadn't made it into Ukraine yet, which of course is so untrue because there's a long history of feminism in Ukraine.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I assume it occurs in other countries as well of
absolutely. I mean, I've seen this, Asian women are advertised this way
Mm.
uh, to in other countries, right? Oh, you're going to find the perfect docile wife. It's pretty unsettling.
Yeah,
So
really
that's then I
gross.
wanted to focus on, well, okay, let's take 13 of these men and explore their experience and what can actually happen if they pursue this fantasy.
And yeah, I love what you do with the characters in the book. So, as you mentioned, there's another character, Nastya, who works alongside Yeva, also with the romance tours industry, and she hatches this plot to want to borrow the RV to kidnap a group of bachelors, partly as to draw the media's attention, and then also hopefully to hear from her mother, who used to ardently protest against the bridal industry. So where did this plot point come from of a kidnapping? Was it just your sort of frustration after hearing about this account that your sister had?
Right. Well, originally I was thinking of writing more of that standard kind of mail order bride trope of a novel where, a Ukrainian woman marries a man abroad, sorry, goes abroad and something goes wrong, right? And I kept trying to write that story and it just wasn't working. And then I started reading Deb Olin Unferth's book Barn 8, and it's about these activists who kidnap like hens. So that they take thousands of hens from their farms to protest the uh, terrible conditions of the egg industry, right?
Mm.
And I loved that premise so much, and I thought, okay, I would like to write an anti kind of mail order bride. And I know that's a derogatory term that I'm using. I'm using it deliberately that way. I would like to write the anti mail order bride book in that sense. The other thing is Femin originated. So they're a feminist activist group, and they originated in Ukraine. And their early practices were these nude protests or these shirtless protests, which were very controversial.
Mm.
And a lot of what the activist practices in the book, they are based on Femin.
Okay, great. Yeah, yes. I wanted to ask with Nastya and her sister Saul's mother, who you described some of her protest actions, and so yeah, I was wondering if she was based off from a particular real historical person or was like wholly invented in this way. So yeah, so
Yeah,
you.
it's definitely a fictionalized account, but that that kind of passion and the provocative nature of the protests, yeah, that was a huge inspiration was Femin for sure.
Mm. And I do really appreciate how you handle different forms of romance and sexuality and asexuality in the case of Yeva within the novel, and with regards to both humans and snails, and the sort of parallels of looking at sort of different forms of sexuality in this way. And so I was wondering if you could speak about this and how you explored in the story, and were you actually trying to comment upon the romance genre itself in a way?
Absolutely. I wanted to, well, this is something I often try to do in my writing, is I try to write kind of the mirror image of something or to combine opposites together. And you know when you're trying to, when you have two magnets and you have the opposing sides and you're trying to fit them together and they're repelling, but there's this very interesting energy. It's almost like a slippery energy between the magnets, right? And what I wanted to contrast was all the romance of the romance tour industry, right? All the kind of uh, like almost forced, the speed dating, all the socials, and all of this kind of kitschy language around love. And so that, and all the pressures that Yeva has to start a family of her own, not necessarily with a man from abroad, but just in general, she has this
From her
giant
family. Yeah.
extended family, and they all want her to have children, and she's beautiful, so it's almost offensive that someone like her would not want to pass on her genes,
Mm.
those things. And she's trying to breed snails, right? She herself is trying to make this environment of, I don't know if I want to say romance, but a breeding environment, right? So
Hmm.
all of these things juxtaposed with the fact that she is not someone who wants that herself. I mean, I would say she can have a romantic relationship, but not a sexual relationship. I wanted to contrast those things and kind of, yeah, feel that energy, that friction between them.
Yeah, and I love the parallels between how you show some of the romance tourism and the weird atmosphere of those of people pairing up and having this awkward conversation through translators, and but then also the very contained environment that Yeva tries to create, and having these snails breed, and they don't always want to breed with each other, and the almost tragedy of that, of thinking, oh, but come on, you if you don't, then that's going to be it for your species. But it's yeah, it's almost their choice. Yeah.
Yeah, snails can be very finicky, and it's difficult to recreate their home environments sometimes. So she has a big challenge ahead of her.
And just as the plot of this story is swinging into motion, there's an abrupt change because the full-scale invasion of Ukraine occurs in February 2022, and then you yourself start to enter into the narrative. And I've read how you began writing this novel in 2018. So I was wondering, how much of the story had you written to this point? Had you already plotted out like where the story would go and how it might end?
I had a very vague idea of the kidnapping, that, the kidnapping would proceed and something would go wrong, and there would probably be a fire of some sort. And that was all I had in my mind, and I hadn't written that part. So where I was in the book, so where you see it derailing in the book was, I believe, pretty much where I was at in the plot when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. And I, yeah, truly did not know how to continue, because to keep writing about romance tours just seemed not relevant to me anymore. And it was no longer what I was obsessed with. And what I, of course, was obsessed with was the war, because my relatives were there and they were fleeing their homes. And I didn't know the role of fiction or of myself in fiction at the time. So I, yeah, I gave up on the book for a while. But then because those questions kept swirling around in my mind and it kept obsessing me, I thought, what if I actually make them into the fabric of the novel?
And it's really fascinating how those metafictional like elements enter into the narrative, and so it made it feel like the story was being written in real time, in a strange way, which was so made it so arresting. I felt. But had you considered alternatives? Like, did you think about possibly writing an entirely different kind of story, or writing a memoir or nonfiction instead?
That just didn't seem feasible to me. Maybe because I haven't written a full-length memoir before, but I just kind of was feeling it out. So when I was gonna go back to Ukraine to visit and to research, I was writing these diary like notes in my on my laptop, and because I had to kind of process the idea of, oh my God, I'm going to go to Ukraine and I'm terrified, but I have to go. And then once I was in Ukraine with my sister, again, I couldn't really write fiction there either because there was so much happening, and so I what I could do was record the material of what was happening around me. So yeah, nonfiction, and it was kind of a way to distance myself almost from the reality of being there, because if I could write about it and treat it as material, it's almost like it wasn't real, if that makes any sense. So then, I had my the fictional elements of my book, and then I had these diary like entries, and I wasn't writing them for the book. It's just that that's all I could write at the time.
Hmm.
And so I had these different pieces, and I realized, well, I think I'm going to try to combine it together because both forms have a certain truth to them. They speak to a broader truth, I think, when put together. So that's what I tried to do.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it makes it really impactful because I could how it shows the ways that we react to the immediacy of emergency, like a large scale conflict such as that, whether it's finding a way to be able to emotionally distance ourselves from the here and now as a way of coping, or through dark comedy as a way of yeah, coping with the horrors that are actually taking place. And there's several ways that you interrupt the primary story. I'm not only talking directly to the reader, but bringing in this extra textual information, such as discussions which occur with an agent regarding what form this novel will take, and an application for funding to travel to Ukraine to complete the book, and a wish that you could simply end the war with a kind of magical thinking. And the novel itself has a false ending, where you give acknowledgments and about the author section. And I know this was really surprising for a lot of readers who thought, especially some readers I know who have listened to the audiobook and suddenly thought, wait, is the novel actually over or not? And so it's you're kind of Ron putting the reader and well, keeping them on their toes, really. So were you nervous about making like such a bold choices, and did you receive any editorial pushback about including aspects such as this?
I I was nervous, yes. And I actually, before sending this novel to my agent, who was, yeah, the first one to read it in full, and then before, my editors even saw it, I had actually taken out all the metafictional elements myself because I was squeamish. I thought, no, this is strange, and people are going to be am I'm almost having too much fun with, the grant application in the book, with the note on type, with the fake acknowledge. It's almost too enjoyable for me to be. I can't. It can't be useful almost. So I actually took them out, but then I realized I was missing them. So then I put them back in, and then when my agent read the book, and then when my editors read the book, they were really, really supportive of
Great.
all of it. And they kind of read it cold, so I didn't, tell them where the book was going. Yeah, they were really supportive and remain supportive. Just wonderful to work with. I'd also like to add that the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once helped me be more brave about that kind of disruption in the middle of the book, because I'm not sure if you've seen that movie.
Yeah,
You have.
great.
Excellent. So do you remember that there's a fake ending in that movie?
Yes, yeah. Oh, wow.
And I saw it twice, and in the movie theater, and nobody got out of their seats at the ending, like when the credits are rolling, etc. No one is getting out of their seats because I think our narrative brains are so primed for what is a satisfying ending and what feels right that everyone I thought was okay. Well, there has to be more to the story. This can't be it. Uh, so when I saw all these people remaining in their seats, I also thought, you know what? If I try something like this in my own book, I can trust the reader to stay in their seats. Not maybe for my book, not everybody will stay in the seats, but I think enough people will, and enough people I think have. The reception to that has been really heartening. But yeah, with that fake ending, it's like all of the frustration I was feeling with this book, right? And just trying to finish the darn thing and basically just slapping together some sort of ending, right? Because it's a bad ending, right? It's bad. And because it's there's too much of a bow on everything. Everything ends too
Yeah, it's all summed
perfectly.
up. Mm.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like, okay, that's how I would have ended the book if I just wanted to send it off. But I knew, of course, just like any reader would know, that that's not an ending to this story. It has to keep going.
Mm. Yeah, and I think in that way it kind of simulates our own experience in the world because when we plan out our days, but then something occurs and it's interrupted, and then but we have to figure out like a way to go forward, and yeah, and I think it really shows that. So, in addition to becoming a self-interrogation in a way about how to write about the conflicts, and the novel also interrogates the way that the Western media covers the war in Ukraine. So, I was wondering if you could give some of your general impressions about how the war is covered by news outlets versus the news that you receive from family and friends that are in Ukraine or have recently left the country.
I think this is probably true for all war coverage, but what we see in the headline is of course, the daily hell of the war, and that on any given day, there's crisis in different parts of the country, right? And of course, casualties and injuries. But having actually spent time in, let's see, I went to Kiev, and I was in Lviv, and I also spent a day in Kharkiv when I was there on my trip with my sister. And so it was really interesting to be kind of under the headlines there and seeing how people were still living their lives. So people were still going to the theater. Of course, there would be the announcements at the beginning of the play or the opera saying, if there's an air raid siren, this is what we're going to have to do. Or people would meet underground as well. So seeing all the way that people do, those who have stayed in Ukraine, how they do determinedly keep living their lives, that's not something we see in the immediate crisis of the headlines, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, because that itself is a form of resistance, isn't it? Of just carrying on with your life instead of, yeah, letting it completely consume.
Yes, that's right. And that connects with the question of humor as well. That it's I think the kind of humor that was coming out of Ukraine, like all the memes and the jokes, I think that was perhaps surprising to non-Ukrainians that there was so much wartime humor in such catastrophe. And I mean, yeah, Ukrainians have such a long tradition of that kind of humor as a survival mechanism, I would say. Yeah, because if you can make fun of something or your enemy, you can rise above them in a certain way.
And there's a very disturbing and striking scene in the novel which portrays the creation of Russian propaganda. So I was wondering if this was based on a real account and how prevalent is such propaganda as far as you're aware or
Yeah, it's something that my relatives in Kherson told us about, that they were seeing all these trucks coming in with what seemed like they were extras, right? And there were all these trucks coming in from Russia. And I mean, when back in 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea, there was this convoy of white trucks that they'd sent in. kind of under the guise that they were humanitarian aid trucks. So I, yeah, unfortunately, this is something that has happened and continues to happen where the war is packaged, repackaged for the Russian public to make it more palatable, right? That, of course, Russian soldiers are saving Ukrainians. Ukrainians want to be saved, especially, the Russian-speaking ones, which, of course, is not, none of that is true.
Yeah, so it seems so disturbing and surreal, but I love that your novel highlights this as because it shows that this is a form of warfare as well. That it's not just shooting guns and dropping bombs. It's also in the creation of this propaganda, and it enables this war to continue. Yeah, I thought that was so powerful. Now, the storyline also diverges at different points, and some scenes have a few false conclusions. And while I was reading this, I was kind of reminded of those kind of choose your own adventure stories that I used to love reading when I was younger. But it obviously takes on a much more serious tone in the novel because of the reality of the ongoing conflict. So I was wondering if you were also, was that kind of in your mind as you were writing it? Were you a fan of this form of fiction, or were there other literary writers who use innovative forms of narrative that inspired you? I mean, you already mentioned the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, but yeah, I was wondering if there were other.
Right. I think specifically to the repeating chapters, the chapters where I basically it's a fantasy of how I would have rescued my grandfather, right? And I kept kind of replaying the same scene in my head and reformulating it every time, kind of as a rumination. I mean, that's just what I do. That's how my mind works. And it helps me in my fiction because then I can make these scenes in my head and I can constantly build and rebuild them to make them better and more vivid. Right? But it's actually it can be pretty self-destructive as well, right? Because it feeds that this obsessive kind of rumination, right? So I wanted to put that into my writing, that kind of open the curtain to the reader of, okay, a scene isn't just written start to finish just like that. A scene takes on so many different iterations. And this is me trying to get the scene of my grandfather's rescue right, as if I get it right, then it'll actually happen, right? So it's also me testing the limits of fiction as well.
And one of the bachelors, Pasha, he seems to share similarities with you regarding his background and upbringing, but also very clearly he's very different from you in a number of ways. So I was wondering, where did his character enter into the story for you in the writing process? Did you create him after deciding to use a different form of narrative, or?
He was always part of the narrative because I did want to have kind of an in into the bachelors, who are being kidnapped, and I wanted, because I couldn't have all of their perspectives because there's 13 of them, I wanted to at least have one of the men like be accessible to us, right? Through, omniscient narrator goes into his mind. And so that's why I wanted to have him there to kind of try to balance out the narrative, right? Because the book begins so much about the women's perspective of the romance on the romance tours, right? So I wanted to try to balance it out a little bit. Yeah, Pasha's story definitely has some parallels with my own immigration story, like the age of immigration, the kind of the cultural shock of immigrating from one country to another. But his story is in many ways the reverse of mine, in that my parents didn't push me into any specific career, luckily. They didn't push me into the practical stuff like many immigrant parents do. So I was kind of free to choose what I wanted to do. But I wanted to explore this possibility, this fictional possibility of, okay, what if you're an immigrant child and your parents, instead of pushing you into the practical careers, what if they pushed you into something so lofty and actually just unachievable almost, right? So they want him to be a great artist.
Mm.
Right? How do you plan for that? How do you make that as a goal? And you're almost setting yourself up for failure if that's your goal, right?
Mm.
It's a bonus that happens from a good practice, right? But poor Pasha, he's being pressured in this kind of way, and I think he also does reflect the what a lot of millennials feel in North America of the sense of failure, of not being able to measure up to their parents' material success, right? So if his immigrant parents, within 3 years could buy a house, like mine did, uh, yet he will probably never be able to afford a house in Vancouver. So that kind of sense of failure that he has, and then thinking, oh, what if he can just restart in Ukraine, restart his life where the cost of living is cheaper, and he becomes kind of like a reverse mail order bride, where he himself is going to Ukraine to marry a Ukrainian woman to stay in Ukraine. So he thinks he's going to be saved actually in Ukraine. Again, it's like that kind of playing with opposites I was telling you before, like those two magnets, right? So, okay, what if we
Mm.
have a man actually trying to live in Ukraine thinking he'll be saved rather than a woman trying to leave Ukraine thinking she's going to be saved, right?
And with the other bachelors, so we're first introduced to them, and a number are distinguished with different names and backgrounds. But as the novel goes on, I thought it was interesting how they become more sort of an amalgam of a certain type of Western man. So I was wondering if you could speak about how you handled all of these characters. As you say, you can't have each of their individual stories shown and what they kind of came to represent for you.
Right. Yeah, because they start out as having, different names and occupations. But you're right, they do become more and more this amorphous group, right? And they almost become like a hive mind. And I wanted to explore, what can happen in captivity, basically, right? Because they're confined to a trailer. And I think they all know on some level that things are really not going well for them, that there's no secret getaway, romantic getaway that they're being taken to. I
Mhm.
think on some level they know that the war truly is happening, although maybe not Bertrand. I think he's very convinced it's not happening. But I think on some level they all know that things are very, very dangerous. And because they are completely powerless, instead they form their own almost like a cult like being, right? That they have to believe in each other no matter what. And they have to work as a group. And that in the end, I think they find camaraderie in each other rather than the romance that they thought would save them, right? So they really find each other at the end is what I was hoping would happen.
And I'm eager to speak to you about the ending of Endling. But I'm aware, just for anyone watching this, that this may like count as spoilers. So for anyone watching who hasn't read the book and doesn't want anything spoiled, then I'd urge you maybe just to stop watching this video and then come back to it after you complete the novel. But I'm really curious to ask you about the ending because we're left with a number of ambiguities and with certain characters and their storylines, and it felt very effective to me, especially the very chilling epilogue of the novel. But I wonder, was it challenging arriving at this conclusion, and were you worried that this might feel unsatisfying to some readers? And did you test out writing different endings? Because yeah, it ends in a very different way from the false ending that we get in much earlier on in the novel.
Right. The false ending, as we were discussing earlier, the false ending is not a very good ending, right?
Mhm.
Everything is summarized and everything is yeah, there's a bow on everyone's storyline that the bachelors get to the border and they're fed soup, that the women are safe, and everybody has a great, lovely ending. And when I continued writing the novel, I just knew that this would be really untrue to the situation of the war, where there's just so much uncertainty, and you don't get a little bow at the end. You don't even know how when your ending will happen, right? So at the end of the book, let's see, we have the furthest that the women can look is will we get to the hospital, right? So the furthest that they can really control, well, no, they can't even control that, is the next few hours, right?
Mhm.
Is can we get to the hospital? to save bleeding Yeva, right?
Mhm.
So to write the book beyond that, just it would have seemed really, again, untrue to this, like what it, that immediacy of the war, that the book is very actually compact time-wise, right? It starts about a week before the full-scale invasion, and then it's only, I think, about 48 hours afterwards. So that's the frame of the book. I actually did an earlier draft, there was a little bit more certainty about one of the characters. So in an earlier draft, Yeva definitely dies. Like you see her die, and you know she's dead. And it was actually uh, some reader reactions. So my editors and also a few other readers just they thought I they thought she can't just die. Like please don't make her die.
Yeah.
And the reason why I then changed that into more like a less certain death. Like we actually don't know if she's going to die in the final version, right? Like I think different readers have their own interpretations of what happened. But the reason why I listened to that feedback was because I realized that my motivations for having Yeva die were to teach the reader something, right? That, oh, you've been so emotionally attached to this character. Well, guess what? A war will kill anybody indiscriminately. So
Mhm.
too bad. But I realized I don't want to, bat the reader over the head with a message that it's not very fair, and readers are really sensitive to if the author is trying to provide a message and teach them something that's kind of patronizing.
Mhm.
So I kind of interrogated my own motivations for making Yeva die, and I realized I don't want to be that writer. So that's why I did kind of soften that a bit. I thought, let's have it be more uncertain what actually happens to Yeva.
I definitely appreciate more open-ended endings to books because yeah, it just sort of feel more true to experience in life. And even though the endings that you give to these characters, there's a lot of tension and uncertainty, but there's also the kind of happy prospect that Lefty has found a mate, hopefully, and that hopefully that their species or subspecies will still be able to continue. So I like that you gave a kind of a bit of positivity alongside this bleakness. Thank you.
Yeah, one of my friends who was reading the manuscript was like, "Oh man, with everything that's happening in this book, well, at least Lefty better get some, you know? At least he got his happy ending."
Yeah, that's great. Now, I'd love to hear about some books that have influenced you. And normally I like to ask this of authors at home so that they can show their actual copies. But I appreciate and know you're traveling. So, would you like to talk about any books that were either significant to you in your life or your writing or the creation of this novel itself?
Absolutely. So yes, I am traveling, so I don't have the books with me, but I made my own covers of them
Oh,
to present for this video. So I don't know, maybe I'm actually insulting the authors by doing this,
that's
but
so
I wanted to
cool.
have like a physical object, you know? So,
Hmm.
my stick figure rendition. Okay, so
I love
this
that.
this one, so this is oh, I suppose this is a mirror image of I don't know if it's showing up, but
I
this
can see
is
it the right way around. Yeah.
oh, awesome. Thank you. Clam Down by Anelise Chen. And this is also a book that plays with its own genre. And it's a memoir about a woman who undergoes a divorce, and she texts her mother, and her mother says, just clam down. And it's a typo from calm down. And then the author just totally goes with that typo, and she kind of as a character in this book turns into a clam, and you don't know if it's like, is she literally a clam or is this a symbol, so it teeters between that in a very fun way, and it's a beautiful book, and she's constantly interrogating how to write this memoir and how to write about the people she knows. She writes about her father through his own first person perspective, which I thought was very risky, but really well done. So yeah, I would recommend Clam Down by Annalise Chen. This is a book that is not out yet, but I blurbed it and I'm really excited about it. It's coming out in February 2026, and it's called Eradication, and it's by Jonathan Miles. And the cover does have a goat on it with an island. So
Oh, I thought
I'm
at
sorry,
first that was a
Jonathan,
submarine, but no, I totally see the goat in Island now. Yeah, that's really
so I'm Jonathan. I'm sorry for butchering the cover of your book. But yeah, so this kind of falls in line with the conservation element in my own book, in that if readers enjoyed that part of my book, they might enjoy this as well. So it's about a man who has never really held a gun in his life, who is hired to go to this remote island and cull 40,000 goats from it, because these goats are overtaking this island and eating all the wildlife and causing extinctions. So it's about this question of, okay, when we're kind of playing God with ecology, when we're deciding which species to prioritize over another, what does that mean? And if you're actually the person who has the gun and with the finger on that trigger, can you do it? So
mm,
it's also about the act of killing itself. But it's also funny. It's a funny book, but it has some really, really deep questions about life. So there's that one. And also we have, this is my third and final recommendation. This is Gray Bees by Andrey Kurkov.
ah,
And so these are supposed to be bees, and this is a beekeeper. And it's about a beekeeper who is in the no man's land in the Donbass area. The no man's land, it's a strip of land between the occupying Russian forces and the Ukrainian side. So it's a man who's trying to live his life, but in this limbo zone, and he's trying to tend to his bees. And I thought it's such a beautiful and complicated rendition of the war before Russia's full-scale invasion, right? So this is in the Donbass in the years, yeah, leading up to the full-scale invasion. But yeah, highly recommended.
oh, great. And that is a novel that's out now, Grey Bees.
Yeah, Gray Bees is out now, and it won the I really hope I don't get the name of this award incorrectly, but it's the National Book Circle Critics Award for Translation.
Oh, okay.
So it won that award, yeah.
Hmm.
And it's published by Deep Vellum. That Deep Vellum translates a lot of fiction into English, and they do a really, really good job curating their list.
Yeah, they're such a cool publisher. Yeah, really admire their books. Well, yeah, I've not read any three of those books, so yeah, thank you so much for the suggestions. So I really greatly appreciated how this novel gives such a refreshing view on the conflict in Ukraine, as well as a number of other issues you were talking about of environmentalism and sexuality and the romance industry, and obviously the war is still ongoing. So I was wondering if you would like to share any of your thoughts or reflections about the war you've had since completing the novel. I know that's a very broad question. And
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the war is in a very precarious place right now, and it has been especially since the election of Trump. And the danger, of course, is that, the media cycle moves on from, even if a crisis is ongoing, if there's a new crisis, of course, it moves on. So my fear is that the war it'll just become normalized, and that we will be unable to imagine its ending. And I hope that with this book that readers can kind of see again beyond the headlines and into the lives of real people and ordinary people who are impacted by this war, and to have that kind of feeling of that on the ground experience along with them.
well, thank you so much for discussing this very original and impactful book with me. And best of luck to you with the booker and your writing in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. And I just wanted to add that my mother sent me a video of your review of the book on, your YouTube link, and she sent it to me actually before you asked me to be on this channel. And
Uh,
I'll tell you what she said, if I may. She said, and she's been reading a lot of analysis about the book, and she said, "I liked his analysis very much, better than many other reviews." So you have the approval of my mother.
Oh, that is so wonderful and flattering to hear. Oh, gosh. Oh,
Thank you for having me on your channel. I appreciate
oh.
it.
Well, it's very wonderful to yeah, meet you virtually in this way, and hopefully we might meet in person at a Booker event or yeah, some event in the
I
future.
really hope so. That would be wonderful. Thank you, Eric.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day, and
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Take care.
bye
Bye.
bye.